You ever wonder why when you hug that relative who has a belly, it doesn't feel all soft and fluffy like most of us who grew up watching the Pillsbury Doughboy commercials were led to believe?
Oh, the deception!
Exactly what I was thinking. But instead, it's actually quite hard and protruding. Well, the reason for this is that's not your typical type of fat. It's a unique one. A fat which, if you have your present-day health and long-term vitality in mind, you need to know about. No more deception up in here. Let's go. Yo, what is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run LiftandBalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and longevity and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic way. Today we are discussing a very nefarious relationship, which could be one of the major drivers for premature and accelerated aging. A cellular and metabolic relationship which feeds on itself in a vicious cycle of continuous dysfunction until its host is figuratively and literally fighting for their life. Yeah, not cool. But most importantly, we are going to talk about how we can prevent and even reverse it. And no, it's not a holiday dinner with your extended family, although it does fit most of the aforementioned description. This dysfunction is the health deteriorating cycle of visceral fat, oxidative stress, and cellular senescence. All biological happenings which we have discussed at length on this channel. But today, we're really gonna connect the pieces, because we've got some new, hot off the scientific streets, research displaying how this interplay induces chronic cellular damage such as genotoxic and proteotoxic stress, aka the damage to genes and proteins, which we know is problematic from videos like this one, to the point where disease and morbidity are the only likely outcomes. And I've got a little secret for you. All of this is heavily influenced by your lifestyle and environment. What you eat, how you sleep, the movement you do, the nature you interact with, the stress you manage or don't, and the everyday toxins you expose yourself to. But we'll get to all that in just a little bit. First, we take our initial stop on this journey of dysfunction, exploring that nefarious type of fat, visceral fat, which, unlike its subcutaneous counterpart, aka that fat that builds and accumulates on the outskirts of our body, is not a law-abiding metabolic citizen. Instead, this is the fat that accumulates in and around the abdomen, often atop our most critical metabolic organs, such as the liver, pancreas, intestines, and even heart. A happening which occurs when the body is chronically, over the course of years, overwhelmed by an abundance of fast-acting energy, aka glucose and fructose, from quickly absorbed ultra-processed foods and drinks, to the point where it cannot use or export it to other areas, and thus begins to store it locally right there. And at this point, you may be wondering, okay, but why is it hard? Well, it's not. The reason it feels hard is because this accumulation happens under the muscles of the abdomen, creating a belly with a hard shell barrier between it and the skin. And unfortunately, this isn't the worst part. That happens to be the fact that this tissue is extremely inflammatory, chronically secreting immune-enticing cytokines which spur a state of chronic inflammation. Inflammation which often damages the healthy and critical organ cells in the area, impairing them from doing their job. Thus, over the course of years, leading to the acceleration of dysfunction and ultimately disease. Yikes is right. But here's the thing you gotta understand. Those same habits which drive the accumulation of this type of fat also often drive damage to the mitochondria of cells all across the body, causing them to become less efficient and leaky. And that's not a great thing when it comes to the organelles that you rely on to produce all of the cellular energy you need to sustain life. This situation, referred to as mitochondrial dysfunction, a topic that we dive into quite a bit on this channel, which I'll link below, is thought to be one of the hallmarks of aging. And you may be wondering, what exactly do these mitochondria leak that could be so bad? Welcome to the next inflammatory part of our cycle of dysfunction. When mitochondria are unwell, their membranes become more permeable. And the byproduct of this is the release of unstable compounds known as reactive oxygen species, often called free radicals, which, in a relentless pursuit to neutralize themselves, damage other healthy cells. Now, before you start getting all nervous, I see you back there. Chill out. I want to also let you know that this is a natural part of cellular biology. In fact, as we discuss here, free radicals are critical signaling compounds, so a certain amount of them is actually necessary. In addition to this, our body has actually evolved with built-in safety mechanisms to stop these reactive oxygen species in their tracks before they can do major harm. Whew! Oh man. Win for the good guys, right? These natural guardians are called antioxidants. However, when the mitochondria dysfunction gets a little too prevalent, these antioxidant defenses can become overwhelmed. And that means there is now an internal state that has more reactive oxygen species than neutralizing antioxidants, a biological state known as oxidative stress. And this is where free radicals begin their tirade of damage. One of the main and likely targets being none other than visceral fat. See? I told you this would kind of make sense. An interaction setting the stage for another hallmark of aging, and the third stop on our journey of dysfunction, cellular senescence, which is when a cell stops its natural cell cycle of dividing due to an accumulation of damage. Kind of like an employee who stops working hard because they feel underappreciated. But here's the main problem. Unlike a normal scenario where a damaged cell would trigger recycling pathways or program cell death to mitigate the threat of spreading damage to fellow cells, these senescent cells just sit there, disgruntled, secreting bioactive compounds known as cytokines and driving up inflammation in the area, literally creating a toxic workplace and ultimately damaging more cells in the area that, wouldn't you know it, enter a senescent state themselves. So let me pause and ask, are you starting to put the pieces together? You know, on how these three happenings nefariously work together to trigger a biological dark age of dysfunction? Wait, you know what? Now that I think of it, we never connected the dots between visceral fat and cellular senescence, did we? What a perfect time for this new study. A group of researchers out of the University of Minnesota sought to explore what precisely is driving visceral fat cells to be a little too suspiciously converted to a senescent state more often than other types of cells, using an in vitro or outside the body environment and mouse model to explore this interaction. And what they found was a class of compounds known as enols were the common denominator. This is because lipids, which comprise the membranes of cells, especially visceral fat, are very susceptible to something called perioxidation, which is a process where polyunsaturated fatty acids, aka PUFAs, in cell membranes, lipoproteins, and other lipid structures undergo oxidative degradation. And as a byproduct, one of several enol compounds are formed. In fact, previous research has found that these enols accumulate to surprisingly high levels in visceral fat. Interesting. So, what new observations did this team find? Well, that these enols, which often last longer than oxygen species in the body, easily pass through cellular membranes and readily react with proteins, including the nucleic acids of DNA, aka genes, and actually drive the cell into a senescent state. Oh, that's not cool. Now, I want to reiterate that this was only in an animal and in vitro model, not humans. That being said, it does add to a very nefarious picture displaying how dysfunction builds on dysfunction. Mitochondria dysfunction, free radicals, oxidation, DNA and protein damage, senescence, more inflammation, and thus more dysfunction. A slippery, nefarious slope indeed. One which I personally believe we can all do something about. Welcome to the Owning Your Health portion of the program, which I want to start by calling out that one of the observations from this previous study, which I failed to mention but we'll talk about now, was that mice fed a high-fat processed diet were observed to have elevated amount of enols when compared to a control group fed a healthy diet. And as we saw in previous senescent cell deep dives like this one, certain compounds, like phytonutrients from real whole foods, can actually prevent and reverse the accumulation of senescent zombie cells, and in the process impact all the other key components in this cycle of dysfunction, such as mitochondria efficiency and leakiness, antioxidant production, visceral fat accumulation, and prevalence of inflammation. So, wait a sec. What if we just lived a lifestyle which proactively did all these things? Would we be mitigating our risk before it even became a risk? Long answer short, probably. As lifestyle interventions such as strategic daily time-restricted eating, frequent cardiovascular and resistance training, real food eating, connecting more with nature, managing stress through mindfulness, breathwork, and meditation, consistent, high-quality circadian-aligned sleep, and avoiding the harsh unknowns of chemical-riddled products have all been shown to place one's cellular and metabolic self in an environment for efficient operations. And thus, high-quality mitochondria function, more antioxidant production, less visceral fat accumulation, reduced perioxidation, enol production, protein and DNA damage, inflammation, cellular senescence, and continuous cycle of dysfunction. Yeah. Something that the modern Western norms of 24/7 ultra-processed eating, chronically deprived disaligned sleep, indoor sedentary behavior, pharmaceuticals and chemicals galore, and non-stop stress do the exact opposite of. So, if I leave you with anything today, I want it to be the realization that even though dysfunction often drives more dysfunction, the opposite is also true. Efficiency drives more efficiency. A cool, relevant example of this is the fact that data has shown when people who are metabolically unhealthy with a stockpile of visceral fat deploy healthy change, it's that damaging inflammatory internal visceral belly fat which is often the first to dissipate. I mean, empowering much or what? And a reminder to not get caught up with that under the arm fat and love handles. The real stuff that matters is right in the abdomen. At the end of the day, it is a game of efficient cellular and metabolic operations. And if you're living a lifestyle to promote them or not, because at this point in our scientific understanding, we know that we have two truly impactful levers that we can pull: lifestyle and environment. So get out there and control what you can control already. And let's all agree, no more deception.
Oh, the deception!
Yeah, we don't want that.